Hello lovely people. This week I want to talk to you about a book that all of BookTube have been raving about, for good reason. Circe by Madeline Miller.
Sophie Vlogs.
As a small little intro into this book, I studied classical studies at university. I did a whole module on epic as in 1 year, and I also did my dissertation on the Iliad. So love me some classics, love me some Greek stuff, super duper love me some Madeline Miller. This isn't really going to be a spoiler heavy review, it's more that this book has sparked off a little bubble of thinking, and I sort of wanted to just have a little sit down chat rather than necessarily be here is a detailed plot summary of the book, if that makes sense. Much in the same vein, I did a similar thing with The Song of Achilles, which I'll link to below, and I did another thing with Love in the Time of Global Warming, which is going to be especially relevant because I think a lot of the things I talked about in that I'm going to talk about now. So let's talk about this book. Yes. This focuses on Circe. So Circe is this semi-divine, insofar as she's the son of a titan, Helios, and a nymph. So she's a member of the divine, but she's not a god. Right. I have so many thoughts. First of all, I prefer the Iliad to the Odyssey because of characters in the Iliad, themes in the Iliad, stuff like this. My biggest thing that stops me loving the Odyssey more is just that I find Odysseus really funny in many ways, because I feel like so much of the Odyssey is just Odysseus being and then I did this other really cool thing, and there's just a lot of Odysseus talking about Odysseus, and you don't really know if what he's saying is the truth because it's coming from his mouth rather than the muses, if you will. So I was really excited to read this because whilst I love the Odyssey, let's not get confused, I do love the Odyssey very much. I was really excited to be touching on the Odyssey through the eyes of Circe rather than through the eyes of Odysseus. And I think so much of what I love about this book is that whole element, and it sounds so stupid, I love the fact it's from Circe's point of view, but epic as a genre is this real, male-dominated genre. Oral storytelling and stuff was mostly used to tell about the triumphs of men. The Iliad, it's all about blokes at war. The Odyssey, it's all about Odysseus being great. And within those epics, women have moments of speech, but it's largely just in lament. So lament was a socially sanctioned way that women in ancient Greek texts, and also ancient Greek society in many ways, could tell their stories. So especially with the Iliad rather than the Odyssey, part of my dissertation was looking at the figure of, well, all of my dissertation was looking at the figure of Briseis, but when I was looking at her in the context of the Iliad, Briseis' only moments where she gets to speak are in lamenting, but through lamenting, through connecting to, you connect your personal tragedies to the greater tragedy that you're lamenting. So for Briseis, her lament is a way for her to tell us her story, and that's how you find out about who she is, where she comes from, that sort of thing. And multiple people lament throughout the epics. It's just super great. Lamenting. I'm here for it. To bring it back to Circe, I found it really wonderful to have this book that is tapping into epic, and it doesn't just tell the story of the Odyssey, it tells the story of multiple myths to which Circe is connected. The Odyssey is just the most famous one, and my biggest point of reference, just for me. But to be taking something which is it's such this male-dominated genre, if you will, and then to be subverting it by viewing it through the eyes of women, and turning these tales which are so often about male glory, male kleos, singing the songs of these men to honour them and give them glory and this sort of stuff, and instead of focusing it solely on the glorious deeds of men, you're focusing it on almost I don't think obviously women, but also specifically with Circe, women's endurance and motherhood and women's not necessarily suffering, although Circe does go through stuff, but just shining this spotlight onto the lives of women, even this immortal who is much more powerful. She's this amazing sorceress and stuff, but she's still exploited in this, and she's still taken advantage of in this, and she goes through and she suffers and stuff like this. And it's just I absolutely adore this whole like subversion thing that's going on, here for it. And then also on top of that, when you do encounter Odysseus in this, I swear I've taken this thing and I'm saying about how much I appreciate that it doesn't just focus on Odysseus and then I'm just focusing on Odysseus, but that's because I have some thoughts. So there's this concept which when I, back in the day, was at university, we talked about in regards to epic, where it's like types of hero. So like Achilles in the Iliad like embodies like Kleos. He embodies this like live fast, die young, if you will. But you know, like Achilles accepts the fact in like book 9 he has to make that decision where like, does he go home and like have a super long life but no one will remember him, or does he stay at Troy knowing he will die, but his name will go on forever and we'll sing of his glory, and we still do to this day, and obviously he chooses the latter one because we know who he is. And there's this like step 1 of looking at Odysseus in this way is to say that Achilles is Kleos, Odysseus is Nostos. Nostos loosely translates to like homecoming. So like, what Achilles is striving for Kleos at all times, Odysseus is striving for like homecoming. So like all of his clever scheming, it's all with the end game of getting him home. And that's like your basic level 1 reading. And then, if you build on that, there's another view, which is that actually Odysseus, and some people try and argue like, does this mean Odysseus is the perfect hero? Because Odysseus is not just hero of Nostos, but he's the hero of Nostos and Kleos, because crucially, whereas Achilles had to die to live on in song forever, Odysseus got to live and he got to go home. So Odysseus manages to make us sing of his great deeds and honour him and give him Kleos, afford him that honour, but also he gets like that all of the validation that comes from homecoming and comes from like that sort of thing. And where that ties in with Circe, I just keep bringing it back, I'm sorry, but where that ties in with Circe is when we see Odysseus through Circe's eyes, the first time we meet Odysseus and the time that he spends with Circe on her island very much seems like the Odysseus of Nostos. He is using being there with Circe to relearn how to be a husband, how to be someone who exists outside of the realm of war again. And that's a real, like, he, in that moment, is very much like that Achilles is the hero of Nostos concept. But then, later, spoilers, unless you've read the myths, in which case not spoilers, but when Odysseus' son Telemachus returns, after Circe has a child with Odysseus, called Telegonus, he goes off to try and find Odysseus. Odysseus is, like, super paranoid, and he accidentally gets killed by Telegonus, and then Telemachus brings Penelope to Circe's island, and then Telemachus is all talking to Circe about how, like, he hears these tales of his father, but it's not who he recognises, and how Odysseus just absolutely just was bored, wanted the next adventure, he wanted the Kleos, he wanted to be out doing the deeds, and all this sort of thing. So Madeline Miller probably is familiar with this concept because she's way more clever than me, most likely. But I really enjoyed how when this book goes on, just looking at the figure of Odysseus through it, you get this transition from like hero of Nostos, hero of homecoming, to becoming like he was motivated by homecoming, but actually when you strip all of it away, he's motivated by Kleos and he's motivated by searching for that glory, and just because he does it in a way that is more tricky with words and intelligence rather than just fighting doesn't mean he's not still striving for Kleos all the time. And I just loved that very much. Just to actually talk about this book a bit more, I personally adore Madeline Miller's way of writing. I know it doesn't work for everyone, that's life, that's literature. However, for me, Madeline Miller's style of writing does have like this poetry to it, partly in like how she frames things, but also like the rhythms, the sentence structures, that sort of thing. And I assume that's conscious based on her like emulating the epic and the poetry and stuff. And I just, like, I cannot tell you enough how much I absolutely love Circe as a character in this. And like this growth she goes on, because just because she is immortal and she changes, but she changes at a rate that is so different from mortals. And just because she's doing it at a different rate doesn't mean it's not happening. So it's absolutely wonderful to see, like, we go from innocence, and there are moments where we're at vengeance, and there are moments where we're at much more wisdom, and there's just this whole character growth because we're allowed all of this time to like sit with her as a character. We really just like immerse ourselves in it, and I love it. And all of the other myths which are weaved in, whether or not they're like obviously related to her, or it's just like, oh wait, she's related to this person who's involved with this myth, so let's bring that in. I keep using weaving because it's Greek mythology and it's Penelope, and we talk about Penelope at the end of this. Love it, love it. We started off really coherent. We got less coherent. Well, I'm just going to stop now and just say, this is as gorgeous as I hoped it would be. I loved every minute. I might like it more than the Song of Achilles, which is a really big thing to say. Goodness me. I just loved this. I loved it. I loved it. Everything, yes. Yes. And also, I do like the Odyssey, I promise. And the Odyssey does have a lot more focus on, like, women, and women get to have more of a role, and so I liked that essentially, like, her Odyssey equivalent book gives even greater voice to women. I just love everything about this. I'm gonna stop. How did you find Circe? I hope you liked it, otherwise you're gonna be like, you have bad taste. I don't know. Please give me your thoughts. Gush at me about Greek mythology and Circe and the Odyssey, and let's laugh about Odysseus, because, like, he makes me laugh so much. I'm sorry. I'm gonna stop. Have a really lovely day. I will see you next week for something different, probably more coherent. Yes.